fringe phenomenon for hot-headed activists who are out there with disheveled hair and fancy clothes. Open access has been around for well over a decade now. It's very mature, it's very well supported, and many reputable research institutions fully support open access. Not only support, but actually actively require their faculty to make their research available on an open access basis. It is also the case that entire countries like the UK have passed legislation to ensure that all government-funded research is available in open access. So, not new and not fringe. Second myth, open access does not mean that someone will steal your research. This is like such a pervasive myth that's out there that if you make something available in open access, someone's going to come grab it. But it's totally untrue. On the contrary, open access is simply a form of publishing, which means there's a public record of what you have published, and that means it's actually traceable. You can actually go back to say, okay, it's mine because it's out there. And that makes it more difficult to plagiarize. Open access is also not only about journal article publishing, maybe that's how it started, but for me, open access goes way beyond that. It's an assertion on principle that all aspects of academic research should be open and can be open and visible, and therefore verifiable. And that includes not only research publication, but also data collection, analysis, and sometimes even the review process.
Okay, one of the myths is open access didn't destroy the scholarly publishing system, but changed it. Several publishers had to change their business model from subscription-only model to a hybrid model or publishing open access journal. And at the beginning of the open access movement, it was said that with the open access, the scholarly publishing will be destroyed. Oh, this is not true. It changed, but it didn't, it has not been destroyed. Another myth is... He's well alive. Yeah. Another myth is open access articles are not copyrighted, and this is not true also. Open access doesn't remove or reduce authors' rights. On the contrary, authors retain copyright of their articles, while in the old traditional publishing system, the copyright is for the publishers. The third one is that citation of articles are influenced by journals' impact factor. This is true for non-open access journals. If the impact factor of the journal is high, so there is an increase in the citation. But for open access journal, this is not true. There was a study made in 2017. They compared 100 open access journals with 100 non-open access journals, traditional journals, and they realized that the increase of the citation for open access journals is minimal with the increase of the impact factor. If the impact factor of the open access journal is high or is not high, the increase of citations are minimal. It's the same.
I thought Elisabetta had a slide, but it's not her slide yet. Okay. So myths from my side is the one that was mentioned yesterday is how do you guarantee the quality? And I think there's no direct correlation between open access and quality. It's just that a lot of the older journals have had time to build reputation and numbers and all of that. But an article could be bad quality and subscription-based and very good quality and open access. And I think every person in their field should be able to judge the quality of a journal by who is publishing on it, who's on the editorial board, read the actual articles and see what kind of quality they have. Because if it's a new journal, and sometimes journals rename themselves, and then they lose all their statistics from before. So if you know what that journal used to be, it used to be a tier 1, tier 2 journal, and now it's got a new name, it's just reestablishing itself. And so I think tenure departments need to just make that extra effort. The tenure committees need to make that extra effort if someone is publishing open access. And I saw that Jasmina from AUB was saying this is one of the problems is when your institution doesn't recognize it. And then article processing charges, I think there's a reputation that open access journals charge these. And not all open access journals charge for them. A lot of the science journals do because they do a lot of work with the article, but a lot of social science, especially in educational technology, most of them don't ask you to pay anything to publish. And of course, the reputation of paying to publish is problematic, but some open access journals have that economic model. But some journals that ask you for article processing charges, if you're from a developing country, or if you're in a position where you're not able to pay, they often will waive it for you. I've had this waived for me for journal articles, and I've had this waived for book chapters where I've demanded that my book chapter be open access even though the book is not. And some have allowed me to do that without paying anything. So sometimes it's problematic if I have a co-author from a richer institution. And then the last thing is you don't have to always be choosing open access journals. I try to because I think that's better. But if I need to publish in a closed access journal, something Mark is going to talk about again is how to find out when you can archive a copy of it on your personal website or institutional repository or subject repository. I see a lot of people nodding, so hopefully a lot of people already know this, but I know that a lot of academics don't know this stuff. Okay, and this is the section where people get up and stand over there.
Okay. Okay, so the entire story starts with me going as representative of the AMICAL to the AMICAL Europe meetings at the AMICAL is the International Coalition of Library Consortia. And verifying, that was 2016, the first time, how urgent, imperious, and fast it has become to Europe. I really wanted to give you a synthesis. I was not able to because I had too many things to do. But look at the orange language. Urgent, mass, transition, attention, accelerating by 2020. 2020 is tomorrow. Don't forget that, okay? And there has been a real growth, and it's a messy, messy world with several products, not only open access, but also now commercial services, tools. It's really a lot, and it's very difficult to navigate. But take just that. Now, I tried to understand what's the situation now, and even this is very difficult to establish. But this article that is being published in 2018, so it's pretty recent, demonstrates that practically the 28% of the all articles provided with DOI, so 1/3 of those articles are available now in open access. And when they mean open access, they don't mean academic social networks. They really mean only gold, open access journals, green repository. So things that we can really address, perfectly legitimate to address the user to. Obviously, that varies by disciplines, and there are many, there are many journals that still do not have DOI, but still, that's the percentage. And the percentage on the overall production of articles since, I think, the year 2000 or around that. When you come to what is being selected by user, you go to 47%. 47% of the articles searched in 2017 were available to users. So we're not talking about a myth. It's real. Now, real but extremely difficult, especially for an institution like mine, which is a small liberal arts college devoted to teaching and learning with very low emphasis on research. And this is where I feel like how to cover this gap, particularly what we saw, and that is in our minds, that has been in our mind for very long, is that a library like ours Despite the fact that we, as AMICAL libraries, are the only library for our faculty, I mean, we operate in a different national context. Despite so, we are felt as an undergraduate library, punto e basta, we say in Italian, which is not more than that, which means we are entirely detached from faculty publishing and research. This is an extremely difficult situation. You can see from the bubbles, when we did an ethnographic research, how faculty desperately seek for access, asking it wherever, but not to the library. And the library is completely detached from any conversation related to publishing and research. And this is an extreme challenge. Now, what is this challenge only mine? This is what we tried to do. Very limited attempt. And the only thing I wanted to point out is that we have been able to use, and this is also available to all the participants to respond, to activate and paywall on our discovery, so at least there is access to the available open access articles. For the rest, it's a long list of failures.
Elisabetta, maybe you want to tell people does everybody know what unpaywall is? I'm assuming, can you tell them what that is?
Okay, it's a little search engine that looks for open access articles provided with DOI. You can access it directly, so if you Google on paywall, you can go there and find articles from there. In our case, we attached it to our catalog, which is a version of the OCLC discovery, so that the users search simultaneously on everything, including open access articles. And we will see how it goes, because it's pretty recent. We did it in October. So, since there are structural conditions, so it's not that this fight is not a struggle, it's not just, I mean, there are structural conditions for that. I wanted to explore if this is common to other AMICAL institutions. And actually, a few months, I think a month ago maybe, a PhD student in library science approached the consortium because she was doing a research and had a questionnaire that somebody filled, very few, on open access at AMICAL. And I will try to show you the results because I'm searching for solutions for all of us. Okay, the first one is the principle. Everybody strongly agrees that research literature should be free. So here we are, everybody. But the first thing, open access has not had any significant impact on our budgets. Our expenditure for electronic resources is only increasing and very high. The numbers that you see is for, I forgot to say the respondents were only 8, but so the yellow one, the yellow slice represent 4 libraries. For 4 libraries, since 2002, the budget has increased by 100% or over. Actually, one is me, and mine has gone up 1,000%, because we started with 20,000 and we spent 200,000, okay? Just to tell. So this is a big difficulty, because it doesn't sound strategic to work on open access. And other things we haven't done. We haven't been able to replace toll access titles with open access title. We haven't been, maybe we haven't exploited so systematically the availability of titles, because the respondent reported having from 5 to maximum 10 to 5% titles, open access titles in their catalogs. We haven't dedicated staff, and often not really a strategy. So we can take, synthetically, we can say what one of these persons said: open access has been so far only an added value to our collection. Now, stop for a moment and think at collection. What is collection? What is collection for a small liberal art college that subscribes to multidisciplinary aggregators? Collection works for the print very well. Not necessarily it works for the electronic resources. For me, at this point, my electronic resource collection is what I subscribe to. And if tomorrow, and what will it be tomorrow? If open access will remove the money barrier, who will I be tomorrow? And so there are many libraries that are working on this theme, but we need to clarify this. I think this is a very strong team to work with for everybody. Last outcome that comes from the survey is to mainstream open access. It seems that many institutions think that they need dedicated staff and policies. What this means, I don't know. I think we need to launch a deeper discussion about this thing because sometimes these are the answers that come from people that want solution ready-made solutions. Another couple of things, they think that there is a role for the consortium in managing open access resources, which I'm a little bit doubtful what it means. There is a clear indication that open access is relevant for negotiations. And here also, I'd like to have a better conversation. And then other tentative suggestions from myself are, why don't we create an interest group to discuss these things more widely? And maybe AMICAL could do a sort of formal endorsement to encourage the development of institutional policy. I think I'm done. Yes?
Thank you, Elisabetta. So Mark is next up. We forgot to say that one of the people who conceived this panel and was supposed to be on this panel, Dalal Rahmi, was not able to come here. Apparently her visa was late. And she couldn't send us a video, so hopefully we'll be in.
Right. Okay, so I'm Mark Muehlhaeusler. While Elisabetta is focused more on getting access to material, I'll be talking about the reverse of that, how to make your stuff available. And I have to add a disclaimer that none of what I'm going to say is new at all. This should actually be all taken for granted, but it's new perhaps as though that we talk about these things in the same room together as representatives of institutions all in AMICAL. So a lot of what I'm going to say here will probably echo later when we have a discussion about what we do next. So, building support for open access. As I mentioned earlier, it's a two-way street. One part of it is that we make an effort to put our stuff out there. Can I just have a show of hands of how many people here in the room have published their research? Come on. Yes. How many of you have got it out on open access? Yeah, okay, good number. Right, but we could probably do more as institutions. So, as I mentioned earlier, we can make choices about what we do. We can publish with open access journals, as Maha mentioned. We don't have to. We can sometimes publish with non-open access journals, but there's some tools out there. This one's actually linked to the Directory of Open Access Journals, which is a wonderful place to go to find an open access journal in your field. There must be one in your field, probably 2 or 3 that are decent and that don't charge anything. That'd be a way to explore it. The other place I can point you to is Sherpa Romeo. Sherpa as in mountain climbing and Romeo as in Juliet's partner. If you Google it, you'll find a repository where you can find the rules that publishers have. Even commercial publishers that are not open access usually have some provisions to allow you to put your stuff on a repository or a subject repository later in some form of another. That's something you can explore. You can upload to repositories, like subject repositories like archive and SSRN, and so on and so forth. There must be one in your subject area too. And you can share through scholarly platforms like academia. Again, who's got an academia account in this room? Mendeley, something else? Anything? ResearchGate? Okay, good. These are useful for to share your research, but also to connect to colleagues. Over and beyond that, your individual effort, you can also take a stance. As Maha mentioned earlier, it's an opportunity for advocacy to say, hey, I want to have my content available in open access. Even with a commercial publisher, you can do that, because like any contract, the publishing contract is not valid until you sign on the dotted line. And until that moment, you can stipulate about any condition that you want. And more often than not, they might give in. They might give in a little, they might give in a lot. If nothing else works, there's the Spark addendum. I use the Spark addendum for absolutely everything I try and send to a publisher. It's basically a sheet of paper. You attach the contract, and it says, if you don't respond and deny this contract, you have the right to power to post it up there. And it works beautifully. So far, no one's ever noticed that I sent it, and I therefore happily post my content to any repository that I like. But this is a form of advocacy. If you don't use it yourself, at least tell others that these things exist. You can work as a reviewer for an open access journal, and again, tell others. So that's the individual side of the effort. But let's move to the more interesting part of open access within the consortium. So, we're all parts of institutions that are smaller and larger, who are more or less research focused. But I think what we all have in common is that we can educate within these institutions. We can create a website locally. We can even create a website as part of AMICAL. And we don't have to reinvent the wheel. There are plenty of very, very good sites where a lot of the information is already beautifully structured, available. We can just link to them. We can hold a workshop. We can organize an open access day like Maha and myself have been doing for the past, God knows how, 3, 4, 5 years, I would say. I think so. It's been a while. In October, we can assign a point person at an institution or even within AMICAL, the consortial level, to field questions related to open access and to dispel persistent myths about OA. I mean, part of this dispelling the myths session was inspired by the fact that again and again, I get these questions about, oh, what about ownership? And oh, what about this or the other? There's still a lot of uncertainty about that, and I think the more light we can shed into the darkness, the better. And finally, empowering. As I said right at the beginning, I feel that open access is empowering because it grants access to people who are not in a position of power for whatever reason, because they're not at a rich institution, because they're not affiliated, and so on and so forth. We can institutionally empower researchers by identifying open access journals for them if they don't go out and look for themselves. We can recognize open access publications in the annual review process, which is something that could be done much more systematically, even here at AUC. Unfortunately, institutions sometimes are difficult to move along, but one can chip away at it. You can encourage self-archiving. That too takes effort, but if you provide incentives, again, through the annual review process or in any other way, that'd be a mechanism for doing that. Building it into that review process, perhaps even technically, would be ideal. Like we at AUC, we have an online system where we have to submit all our publications each year, and then it gets reviewed, but that system is totally separate from the institutional repository, which is totally illogical, but it's the way it is. We're hoping to work towards a solution where these systems talk to one another and we don't have to put in data twice or even thrice or 4 times. If you put in once, it should be enough. And finally, and perhaps most importantly, is policies. If at institutional level or even at the consortial level, we could come together and think about policies to put into place and say, as an institution, we require our researchers to make their research available in open access spaces. That in and of itself gives the researcher more clout when they go back to the publisher and say, hey, you need to give me more rights because my institution requires it. So that's actually, it's not a hurdle. It shouldn't be seen as a hurdle. It should be, on the contrary, seen as a kind of empowering moment. So these are all quick thoughts out there, and I hope that we can talk about the details later. Thank you.
I like it. I want to check which one is better. Okay. Scholarly communication content is produced by faculty, researcher, professional, research institute, and laboratories, published by a group of commercial publishers, and collected by academic libraries for the benefit of the university community. This model is called the outside-in model of communication, whereby libraries collect the best published material and preserve them for their community. The emergence of open access publishing changed the scholarly communication system. The open access, which is based on publishing on open access journals and institutional or subject repository and or subject repositories, defined new role for librarians in making the intellectual output of their institution discoverable and trackable by all. Libraries are moving from receivers of scholarly output from publishers to active publishers or providers. Reasons behind the survey that I did. I wanted to know how LAU faculty were dealing with open access issues. I wanted to see how faculty are getting their information during their research process, how they are organizing and managing their raw data, how they are publishing their research findings, how they are using and creating open educational resources, sharing their findings, dealing with the new publishing processes concept, open access, open educational resources, and finally, what is the new role and function of the library in this new communication system. So, the target population was all full-time faculty in Beirut and Byblos campus, 315 full-time, and the total response was 56, representing 18% of response rate. 52% of the respondents were female and 48 male. And the School of Art and Sciences is on the top list of the respondents with 51% of answers. How our faculty were locating our information. 9% were checking the library catalog, 20% checking the databases, 20 are using search engine like Google, etc. Regarding institutional repository and subject repositories, 3% are using the repositories, and 11% are checking new issues of journals. So 40% are using library resources, and only % are asking librarians, and 3% are checking repositories. 3% checking repositories is a small percentage, I think. This means that our faculty are not used to check or to search online institutional or subject repositories. As for the raw data, I asked them, do you preserve the raw data? Where do you preserve it? And do you preserve? 75% said yes, they store the raw data on their personal storage. 11 on cloud storage, and 5 on ResearchGate or any other networking site. In which personal storage do you store your raw data? On USB, on hard disk, 27% on hard disk, 22% on their own PC, and 20% on their work PC. In which research sharing and networking sites, institutional and subject repositories do you store your raw data? Here is the surprise. 21% that said that they store their raw data in LAU repository. And in our LAU repository, we don't have raw data at all. I don't know how they understood the question. We have the publications of faculty, but we didn't start yet putting the raw data. We are thinking of gathering all raw data, especially that for the funders, now it's a must to have the raw data that the authors have used online. So we are going to start gathering all raw data and putting them in our repository. Publishing, where do they publish? 38% published in peer-reviewed journals, 11 in scholarly books, 29 in conferences proceedings, and 10% in open access journals, which is not bad, I think, 10%.
Can I ask you a question, Sausan?
Yes.
It makes it look like open access journals are not peer-reviewed. It's like they're two separate categories.
No. What I meant in peer-reviewed journals, not open access.
Right, but I mean,
yeah,
because that's kind of tricky.
No. The open access journals are peer-reviewed.
Exactly.
Yeah. Open educational resources. Do you use open educational resources in support of your teaching? 27% said yes, and 73% answered by no. What type of OERs are you using? Open textbooks, 53% are using open textbooks, and 41% open courseware. Are you willing to create open educational resources in the future? 68% answered by yes. Do you think that libraries must support you in finding and creating open educational resources? 78% said yes. Have you checked the Open Educational Resources Research Guide prepared by LAU libraries? 89% answered by no. And they want us to support them finding and creating open educational resources, but they never checked our research guide, which was created, I don't know, 4 years ago, maybe? 3-4 years ago.
But do you think the 50% using open textbooks is a real number? Or do they mean free PDFs that they find on the...
I don't know. I doubt about the answers of our faculty. Sharing information. Do you share your research articles? 85% answered by yes. What version? 12% preprint, 16% postprint, and 72% published articles. How do you share your published articles, let's say? By email, 55% answered by email, and 9% on the website. Do you believe that sharing research must be available for free to anyone? 85% answered by yes. Okay, what role do you think that LAU libraries must have in the new scholarly communication system? 16% raised the awareness of open access and institutional repository among faculty. 13% help faculty publish their research in LORE. LORE is our institutional repository, LAU repository. 12% increased the collaboration between the libraries and faculty. 11% research support and finding information. 9% finding peer-reviewed journals for publication, etc. 13% support the teaching and learning process. Major findings of this survey: faculty are still using library resources, They are ready to publish in open access journal and use open educational resources, but need the help of the librarians to locate them. They are sharing their articles with other researchers. They are willing to collaborate with librarians. They are not ready to locate information in institutional repository or subject repositories. Faculty are not ready to archive their raw data in lore. They are not ready to receive help from librarians to manage their copyright with publishers. What can we do in this new communication system? First of all, regarding the administration, I don't know. I think I have 5 minutes. I can, yeah. Regarding the administration, we have to convince them to adopt open access policy, to increase fundings and grants to faculty to publish open access and to create open educational resources, to promote mandate policy to archive faculty publication in institutional repository, because at LAU, archiving faculty publications in our repository is not mandatory, it's voluntary. If they don't want, they are not obliged. I think that we have to oblige them. Engage the faculty to support open access publishing, engage the university to support the use and the creation of open educational resources. With the student, we have to involve and engage students in promoting open access and open educational resources. We have to convince them that the price of textbooks are increasing, and we have to make campaign to use open educational resources, etc. The University of Calgary created a team to increase awareness of open educational resources, identifying possible open educational resources that match course requirement and providing peer reviews of these resources. And NDU, Notre Dame University in Lebanon, also tested an English open educational course to first-year students, then did a survey to see the feedback of the student with this open educational course. With faculty, what can we do? We can explain the process, the mission, and the objective of the new scholarly communication system. We can increase the collaboration between institutional repository managers and subject liaison. We can involve and engage faculty in promoting open access and open educational resources, promote Creative Commons licenses and how to apply them to open access materials and open educational resources, promote LAU open access policy, train faculty on negotiating their rights with publishers through presentation, because till now most of the faculty don't know that they can negotiate their rights. Create awareness for self-archiving to avoid publishers' copyright infringement, raise the awareness of open access and open educational resources between faculty and educate them on their benefit, raise the awareness of LAU repository, explain the importance of publishing in institutional repository and subject repository and open access journal, persuade faculty of the importance of publishing their preprint in lore, and this is what we are trying to do now with the collaboration of the Office of Graduate Studies. We are collaborating together to convince and persuade faculty to publish, to archive their preprints in lore, increase the collaboration between faculty and LAU libraries, and conduct orientation program and training programs about identifying open access tools and resources, because faculty don't know how to locate open access tools and open educational resources. As libraries, we have to participate in the Open Access Week and Open Educational Resource Week. And I want to tell you something. This year we wanted to do an Open Access Week at LAU, but the administration refused. They said that we are not ready for open access at LAU. So they didn't want us to make an open access week. And this was, I think, a terrible thing.
Really sad. I wanted to ask others in the audience, does any other institution do an open access day or week where you are? So what's that?
AUB.
Okay, so a small, like a documentary sort of thing, but not like a big, okay, and workshops, okay. What about, is there a roaming mic? All the mics are here.
I think that AUB did something.
But no, this one's not working, maybe those ones.
While the mic reaches AUB, I can tell you, I did a documentary screening, and I've been for an hour and a half with the most boring student of the entire university, and they were just the two of us.
There is a song, just the two of us.
Just the two. Yeah, we were going to do karaoke, weren't we? So Fatima, can you tell us?
At AUB we do like, we promote all our events on social media, and we raise awareness about this week, but also we do like one day of workshops, one of them on promoting our institutional repository, and especially for like data, research data, because this is what faculty right now can really post, because they don't have the copyright. Most of them do not have the copyright over their publications. So we encourage them at least to post their research data. And at this day also we give another workshop on if they want to publish open access, where to publish. And open access is not free. They have to pay a fee for the publisher.
Not all of them, but some of them. Yeah.
Some of them.
Most of them, most of the ones that
does AUB offer that funding? Because usually
we are trying now to do that. Like what we are trying now is to really start funding open access, because open access is not free for the author.
Sometimes, not
You know,
always.
In journals that they want to publish
The
it, in
particular
journals
ones,
with the high ranking, and it's not free. So we try to get bonuses from publishers, and in this day we distribute bonuses.
How do you get the bonus?
Maha, there is a budget for publishing an open access journal at the Office of Graduate Studies. There is a budget dedicated.
For APCs?
And, yes,
Yeah, that's
but
good. But it's not
as
for
the
faculty?
policy, LAU doesn't want to
encourage
be
this.
committed now.
Do you understand why?
I tried, I didn't understand why.
Because at AUC they let us do stuff as long as we can find the money, right? Sometimes we don't have money, but we still manage. I mean, what we found at AUC is that if we do one thing every day, we don't get a good audience, but if we pack everything into one day, we can get an invited speaker and have people from in here present. Sometimes we get other people from Alexandria and other parts of Egypt who are doing work. Yeah. But we don't have, I don't think we have a budget for APCs. That's what I tell people in order to get a waiver. So, and And the thing with APCs, I think, as an advocacy is, if it's a journal that is 100% open access and that's their financial model, I understand that they take APCs because they have no other source of income. Others are funded by their institution or whatever. But if it's a journal that is not open access and they ask you to pay money if you want your article to be
Hybrid
APC,
journal.
this is double dipping.
Hybrid
hybrid
journal.
This is very, very, I don't know what to call it. I want to say very bad words. Because they're making everyone pay to subscribe to the journal. They're making me pay to publish open access. It's my article. And it's, so I would never, on principle, ever pay that one. I think it's such a waste of money, honestly.
Yeah, they are getting twice money. Conducting surveys on faculty open access publishing, conducting surveys on the use of open educational resources in course, conducting surveys on the creation of open educational resources, this is very important, include open access resources in the library catalog by providing link to them, and create research guide on open access and open educational resources. That's it.
Thank you, Susan.
Thank you.
We We have a recommendations section, but I thought I'd first open up the floor for questions. There was one comment that was put on the Google Doc about humanities folks who, Jeff, that was you who asked this question. Jeff. All right. On humanities folks who don't usually publish in journals, but rather publish like in books, and Mark wanted to answer that question.
Well, yes, I'm a humanities folk as well, yes, and I do realize that, that there's a bit of a difference between journal publishing and book publishing, obviously. In a journal, article user author can do a lot to massage the content into shape, and there's not that much of a workload on the part of the journal publishing, so it's an easier pathway. If you're editing a book, if you've got to create an index and so on and so forth, there is some real work that needs to be done by an editor for you, and that costs, and that makes it much more difficult. That said, I've noticed that in the last couple of years there have been examples of some publishers really went out there and made an effort to create a solid publishing platform for the humanities. I mean, in my own field, I know, for example, that in the Netherlands you've got the wonderful thing called Landelijk Onderzoeksschool Taalwetenschap, who publish linguistics title. They've got a very solid list. You've got the Ca' Foscari in Venice, who publish Oriental studies. You've got a university press in Germany, and so on and so forth. There's several examples of publishers. They're mostly institutions, educational institutions, who have for some, in one way or another, set aside positions to do that editorial work. So if you make the effort to go out there and look for a publisher, I think you might be able to find one now. Then there's also this hybrid model where commercial publishing and open access sort of go hand in hand a little, in the sense that you have a commercial publisher who have really used up all their interest in their backlist and say, oh, you know what, let's just make them away from open access. So Georgetown University Press has done that. And I think it may take a little bit of lobbying on our part to try and approach publishers and say, well, hey, you've got this title that was published way back in the 70s, which is still sort of interesting, but you're not going to make a lot of money. Do you want to make it available? And you've got things like Knowledge Latched, which Elisabetta tells me we had a trial for.
We actually participated to the 2017 pledge.
Actually, I suppose we should. Anyone familiar with Knowledge Latched, what it is? Okay, then we need to add a little explanation here. Knowledge Latched is basically a way to buy out a title. A commercial publisher puts out a title, and the libraries come together and say, okay, hey, we give you this amount, and in return for that amount, you make it available in open access. And that amount, of course, has to be larger than what they expect to make of that title in a given period of time. But it's been successful, and it has been done on a relatively large number of titles, and I hear that, yes.
Yes, we participated in 2017 with 6 libraries. When we tried to reiterate the offer, we found out a different situation, because Knowledge Latched has changed, market model is expanding a lot. But we didn't have the same success with our buyers, say. We got a very favorable situation. I compared with a colleague in the States. I say, yes, well done. We couldn't afford participating in the pledge because for us it was too high. But they wanted the global perspective that I always sell to everybody when I deal with the electronic resources, and so accepted to facilitate a pledge in which we were to give very little. But this has not gone through, and I want to stabilize this kind of efforts, if possible, within our institutions, because it's important, to tell it gently.
Okay, can I just add something about books and platforms? And you can come back to this, Mark. I was telling Antonio Lopez, who was asking earlier yesterday about where do you publish open textbooks. One of the really nice places to do that is the Rebus Community. They work on Pressbooks. Pressbooks is a platform you can use for free, but you'd have to pay a little bit to remove the watermark. But if you work with Pressbooks and you make your book CC BY, they would offer you the support of the Rebus Community, which includes editing and peer review and all that. And there are people who work for Pressbooks who help you with formatting and the editing and so on, and then they solicit volunteers from the community to do the peer review. And I don't know, Robin, have you ever published with them an entire thing? Yeah? Can someone? This one's not working.
There was a mic somewhere. It's just coming to you.
It is working now. Well, this one just eventually turned on. Yeah, this one's working now.
Whoa.
Even too much.
Rebus Community is wonderful. Up until recently, they weren't just taking a whole bunch of stuff, but now they just redid their platform just a few days ago, honestly. They launched, and I think they might be more open now to taking new projects. But I have a textbook that I work on with my students, and it grows every year. It's been about 3 years so far. It's an interdisciplinary theory textbook. And they offer all sorts of support for the kinds of stuff that academics don't necessarily want to do. If we want to focus on our content or working with our collaborators, they can focus on some of the other infrastructure pieces of putting your book together. But Rebus Community is great mostly because they're nonprofit and they're really trying to support an ecosystem for publishing open materials. So I think what they're trying to build is very exciting.
And then in the end, the book is born digital, but it's very easy to make it into a PDF. Like you don't have to make an extra effort to make it into PDF or to make a printable version, which you can then sell, I guess, if you wanted to. And there are some other publishers, like I know Punctum Books. There are a few publishers that are regular publishers, and they offer open access versions. So you could have you could have a paid version that's in a nicer format, or you could have paid, obviously, hardcover or paper, but there are usually some digital version of it that is for free, or free after a certain time, or free if you submit your email or something.
I mean, at ACU, you've got an example of a professor who's running a little publishing outfit for himself where he publishes Greek and Latin readers for beginners, and they're available on open access basis as an electronic file, but you can also buy a hard copy via Amazon CreateSpace if you really desperately have to have that paper copy in front of you. And I actually used them in order to publish an edition of an Arabic text. And I did it because, for me, this was an ethical question. To publish an Arabic text with an academic publisher in Europe means that, in effect, the book would be so expensive that no one in the Arab world would ever buy it. But for me, it was very, very important that people here, as native speakers, have access to that text. And therefore, publishing an open access was the only way for me to go. So there's an ethical dimension in publishing as well.
Okay. I wonder if anyone else has questions or comments before we go into the recommendations. Are you all tired? Okay. Okay, I'm just going to put the recommendations up there. I think everyone here has come up with the recommendations in their own slides as well, maybe a lot more than these. But if we had to focus AMICAL consortial efforts, what can AMICAL do? So obviously there's a lot you can do in your own institutions. In what ways could AMICAL? Well, I mean, I don't actually know if everyone here is already, are we preaching completely to the choir anyway? No? So there are a few things that you learned? Can someone get the mic to, is this one not working?
Thanks. To the answer of speaking to the choir, no. So I'm a faculty member, and for recommendations, I think what's most helpful to me, and I don't know if this would be true to other faculty members, is to think about open access, to separate open access research, my research, and open access teaching. And I think, I know that they're connected, but I think that open access teaching, adopting those sorts of resources and learning how to create them, is almost a sort of an easier transition to make than all open access. And I think a lot of the open access research stuff is very institutionally, in that context.
What is acceptable
right.
is very institutionally
It's different, yeah.
And
but
could be very traditional and therefore more difficult.
Exactly, right, and what works in my institution for promotion, et cetera, all that stuff.
So you would start with the open OERs and open textbooks for teaching where nobody's really looking at exactly what you're doing in the way they do with your publications?
Yeah, right. But yeah, exactly. I think there's a lot more freedom and movement, and I think it also it's more universally applicable between institutions as opposed to how research can be sort of local.
Okay, I'm curious if other faculty in the room, how many of you, are you agreeing or just raising your hand? I'll let you talk.
Cool. Hi there. I'm also faculty. I'm a department chair as well. I was thinking, actually, during Anita's keynote the other day and today, to me, open access research, I think, is just going to happen. I don't think there's any particular problem with it. It's the open access teaching that I actually think is slightly more complicated, so I'd be interested to see how we match up on this. Because I think the issue with open access teaching is spending a lot of time creating resources that everyone elsewhere can then benefit from. That relies more strongly than open access research on a really sort of shared idea of the public good and the idea that we're employed in order to contribute to a public good outside our own institutions and outside our own sort of entrepreneurial neoliberal versions of ourselves as like self-career making kinds of people. And I think I was a lot of the really cool stuff I've seen at this conference about sort of open access teaching resources have been done by people in tenured positions. And I think this is a really sort of scary thing for people. Like my university has a pathologically bizarre obsession with keeping us on short-term contracts. Like you can't have a more than 2-year contract at the moment, right? So what's the incentive to spend 2 years working on something that everybody at another university is going to benefit from if it kills your chance at getting your own contract renewed? Right. So I think that this is, I think for the open access resources in teaching to work, there has to be the hardest thing to do as a consortium or as a university, which is to sort of change the precarity under which the people creating the open access resources tend to be working. And for early career, so I'm not sure if Anita's here, but oh yeah. So the Canadian version of the textbook that you looked at, right? That Canadian version didn't have the original author's name anywhere on the title. I know you said that they have to be kind of credited for it somewhere. And again, it's easy to know how credit for research works, but how do you enforce credit on CC 4.0, whatever, things when it's people taking teaching resources and sharing them around? How do you sort of enforce the idea, I created that database of questions or test things or whatever? So I think to me, that's why the open access teaching is probably the thing we have to focus most on, but also the thing that's most fundamentally difficult, because it's very hard to individually justify that level of work when across the whole sort of educational world, people in faculty positions are increasingly working without the long-term security that's necessary to spend the time creating open access resources.
Totally agree. Thank you for bringing that up.
I have 2 suggestions. One for institutional repositories and one for OERs, for AMICAL. Maybe we can create a group for institutional repository, because as I understood, not much universities have institutional repositories now here in AMICAL. Maybe we can create a group to define how to implement institutional repository, how to use this space, how we can help each other, etc. And the other one is to create a platform for open educational, for creating open educational resources, because it's easy to find and to use educational resources, but it's not so easy to create. So if we can create a platform in which we can upload all open education resources, our courses created by AMICAL members, so they can profit and they can see.
Yes, I see us as librarians and faculty developers. We provide the infrastructure, but I think the underlying structural problems that you just mentioned are not something that AMICAL can fix. And I'm curious what other people think as well, whether those who want to do this, or those who are scared to do this, or those who are ambivalent. Jasmina, can someone get the mic to Jasmina, please?
I have the same problem at AUB. I'm an instructor, I'm on a limited contract, So I understand that kind of, that particular concern, shall we say, where you have to continually prove yourself in different ways. So you have to think about where you're going to dedicate your time and energy and get things done, so to speak. Like, should you be doing committee work, which is going to be, you know, given the thumbs up, or do you want to spend time creating open access, you know, resources and things like that? I want to do more open access things, I must admit, and I'm actually thinking of involving my students in that, like collaboratively working on chapters for a book, for example, or something like that, especially since I teach writing. So I think that can be a very interesting, you know, kind of stepping stone, shall we say.
So not that I have any money or anything, but if you're a precarious person, but you would be able to get paid to do an open educational resource, would that sort of counter a little bit the problem? At least you got paid to do it, versus, for example, when you publish research, nobody's ever, well, okay, obviously you can get funding for the research itself, but a lot of social science research, for example, you don't need necessarily the funding, so.
This matches well with another consideration, and it is that AMICAL has small grants, and so may be funding publications, and so we may have a policy for open access,
which, I mean,
related to the grants we disperse.
Currently it wouldn't fit into any of the categories?
No, I don't know, but still we could start considering a policy. So not only a formal invitation to the institutions to publish open access, but start with ourselves.
I was just checking our DSpace right now online from my university because, well, obviously that says something about not knowing your own institutional repository and what it actually does. And I have to say that our librarians, they offer workshops and things, but as you said, we are at this stage of our career where we have a lot. We need to do a lot still. So maybe in 10 years' time we'll have more time to look into all these things. But one thing that I was thinking that AMICAL institutions should look into are those institutional repositories. And ours, for example, does not include teaching at all. It's just research. So you cannot, like, teaching is completely out of the question. So maybe that's something we could work on to get all AMICAL members to also include open access teaching material. And I'm sure like a lot of us have courses in common, so this could be really useful to us.
Without creating something extra. If whatever you already have you're willing to share, right, then we could all benefit and then be willing to. Okay, there was a question here, and then Jeff, who has the money, might have questions. The question here, he's been wanting to talk for a while. Jeff, can he just respond? And then, sure. Just because he's the director doesn't mean...
He's still director.
No, cool. Well, I was going to say, yeah, I think that grants are definitely a sort of a useful thing. Again, I mentioned my university having these ridiculous short-term contracts, and the people who have to worry less about that are the people who are on grants which cover part of their teaching, because they basically get renewed because part of their teaching is covered by grants, right? So, so grants are helpful, but I think they don't quite get beyond the... I mean, grants have a time limit on them, right? So you're still in the situation of working on something which will benefit everybody and create a good educational ecosystem, but at the possible cost of cutting you out of that ecosystem on an employment basis in the future. So I think that, again, I don't know what AMICAL can do, but I think the fact that AMICAL is a large cross-university consortium, that does mean that it has some weight dealing with university administrations and stuff like that, encouraging not just the creation of open access resources, but the creation of working conditions that go hand in hand with open access as a philosophy. Whereas at the moment, there's definitely in Britain, which is where I'm from, not where I work, but they have as you mentioned, the policy that says, great, make everything open access, also a huge move towards the casualization of teaching. So the goal is spend all your time benefiting the public good, but be aware that you can be cut out of the public as and when we feel like. So yeah, I don't know, I think whatever happens in the long run has to be about making it be less obviously self-contradictory as a drive.
Thank you. Okay, Jeff.
Thanks. I just wanted to, reply to a couple of different questions that have come up from the consortial perspective, I guess. So, first of all, one idea that's come up has been the idea of creating a shared repository across the consortium for OER that's been created by members. And in principle, that sounds like a great idea to me. But one of the, I guess one of the questions that Cheryl brought up when we were talking at lunch about this was, when you're engaging in a collaborative project like that, we should make sure that we're trying to work from the actual needs and identifying what the needs are, what the problem is that we're trying to solve. So I like the idea of us working on some kind of a shared repository, but I think for it to be actually useful, sustainable, and have impact, we would want to make sure that we're identifying exactly what is the problem or need that we're trying to fulfill. The second question I wanted to reply to was the question about grants and what AMICAL can already or currently in a current Mellon grant, for example, over the next few years, there are certain provisions for providing some kind of grant support that could conceivably be put towards the development of OER. I would just say that, well, so first of all, part of it's written into our mission, the idea that we're trying to support the collaborative development of curricular resources. So it's absolutely, as far as I'm concerned, within the purview of what AMICAL does. We have small grants, as Elisabetta pointed out. These are small, so it's 500 to 4,000 euros, roughly the scale. And I would just say that what makes projects particularly interesting from AMICAL's, from the consortial point of view, for something that we're going to fund with a small grant, what makes it interesting is if it has impact that goes beyond an individual and to the extent possible has impact that goes across multiple institutions, or even if it's just at one institution, but it goes beyond that one person. There's some kind of collaboration. It's not just one faculty member working on creating the OER, but they're working in collaboration with the various campus roles that we try to reach out to with AMICAL.
So they can be open access. Okay, we're actually over time. I just realized we're 5 minutes over time. Thank you, everybody, for your attention. And we're here, still for later. Thank you.